The desert was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made a man's hands tighten around a rifle without him realizing it. Rafael Ortega stood at the fence line with his Winchester resting in the crook of his arm, staring into the fading copper light. The herd had spooked an hour earlier, scattering toward the east pasture. Now everything was still again. Even the cicadas had fallen silent. Canelo, his shepherd mix, stood stiff beside him, ears locked forward, a low growl trembling in his chest. Rafael knew that sound. The dog didn't growl at shadows. Something had moved out here, something bold or desperate. For a long minute, the only movement came from the shadows stretching across the sand like long, dark fingers. Then Canelo's growl shifted, easing into a soft whine. Whatever danger had been stalking the herd was gone now. Rafael slowly lowered the rifle. "Good boy," he murmured, his hand brushing the dog's fur. The air smelled of dust, heat, and a faint salt from the Sea of Cortez miles away. His father used to say the wind out here carried the stories a man tried to forget. Rafael believed it. He was 35, and the land had shaped every bone in his body. He turned toward the house, a scatter of weathered adobe buildings sitting alone in the vast stretch of Baja Desert. No neighbors, no help, no one to hear trouble if it came. Inside, he hung the rifle on its rack and lit the lamp. The warm glow fell over the small room, revealing the guitar in the corner. Its strings were dusty and loose. He hadn't touched it since the last time he tried to sing through grief and failed. Silence had become easier company. Supper was simple, beans and tortillas eaten alone at the small kitchen table. He washed the plate, stepped onto the porch, and watched the sky fade from copper to deep indigo. Stars pricked through the darkness, and the wind started to whisper through mesquite branches. It carried something else too, a sense of movement, trouble on the road. His nearest neighbor, Don Mateo, hadn't visited in weeks, but the old man's warning kept replaying in Rafael's head. 3 men riding south, took a trader's goods, asked about ranches with a lone man running them. Rafael didn't scare easy, but warnings like that had a way of settling into a man's bones. The next morning came cold and gray. Rafael rose before the rooster crowed, pulling on boots worn smooth by years of work. He milked the cows in the cool stillness, Canelo pacing beside him, alert but calmer than the night before. By midday, the sun beat down so hard the barn's shadow felt like mercy. Rafael drank warm water from a tin cup, wiping sweat from his brow. Then came the sound. Hoofbeats, slow, steady, coming up the road. He stepped out from the barn as Don Mateo's gray mare came into view. The old man rode up and swung down, eyes sharp as ever. "You look like a man expecting trouble," Mateo said. "Just keeping watch," Rafael replied. "The herd was restless last night." Mateo nodded. "Could have been coyotes. Could have been worse." He dusted off his hat, lowering his voice. "You hear about the peddler?" he asked. "Found him half a day north. Goods gone." "And the men who robbed him?" They asked if there was a ranch south of La Paz with a man living alone. Rafael's jaw set tight. Plenty of ranches south of La Paz. "Not like yours," Mateo said. They shared a meal of coffee and tortillas. When Mateo finally rode off, Rafael remained standing alone in the yard, watching the dust from the horses' hooves settle back into the earth. Evening came with a sky blazing orange, then softening into purple. Rafael worked until the light faded, then set his tools down. As he crossed the yard, Canelo stopped, muscles stiff, growl rising again. Rafael followed the dog's gaze. A figure moved slowly along the road, dragging a leather valise. A woman. Her dress was travel-stained, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She stopped at the gate, lifting her tired face toward him. Even from a distance, he could see the determination in her eyes. "Buenas tardes," she called. "My name is Isabella Torres. I need a place to stay." Rafael didn't answer at first. His hand rested near the revolver at his hip. A lone woman on foot at dusk in this part of Baja, nothing about it sat right. "This is a ranch," he finally said. Not an inn. I know, she replied, but I can't walk any further. I need one night under a roof. She lifted her valise, but it slipped from her hand, falling heavily into the dust. I can pay with work, she said, or with courage, but not with money. The honesty in her voice struck him harder than the words. She looked like she had been walking for days. Dust clung to her braid. Sunburn reddened her cheeks, but her eyes did not waver. Raphael thought of Mateo's warning. He also thought of the empty house behind him. Finally, he opened the gate. The barn loft is dry, he said. You can stay there for the night. At dawn, you move on. Relief softened her shoulders. Gracias, Señor Ortega. She stepped through. Canelo sniffed her boots, still wary but calmer. As Raphael led her to the loft, the lantern light flickered over her face. She moved with a quiet grace that didn't match the dust on her dress. When she thanked him again, her voice carried something heavy beneath the surface. Something she wasn't ready to say. Raphael didn't ask, not yet. But as he climbed down the ladder and walked back toward the house, he felt a shift in the air. Not danger exactly. Change. And out here in Baja, change often walked hand in hand with trouble. Raphael woke before the sky had fully lightened, expecting to find the barn loft empty. Travelers usually moved on before sunrise. It was the way of the lonely roads. But before he reached the barn door, he heard the soft, steady rhythm of milk splashing into a pail. He stepped inside. Isabella was kneeling beside one of the brown cows, her skirt pinned up, her hair tied into a knot at her neck. Her hands moved with the sure touch of someone who had done this work many times before. I hope you don't mind, she said, not looking up. I thought I should start paying for the roof over my head. Raphael leaned on the post. Where do you learn that? My grandfather had a farm outside the capital, she said. I spent my summers there until... She stopped. Until what? Raphael asked gently. Until he died. My father sold the land to pay his debts. After that, everything fell apart. Her voice was calm, but Raphael could hear the weight behind it. She continued milking, finishing with a quiet focus he respected. When she stood, wiping her hands on her skirt, she added, I'll work as long as you let me. Raphael nodded. There's more to do than milking. The morning moved fast with chores. Feeding chickens, gathering eggs, hauling water. She didn't complain. She didn't slow. She moved like someone who had run out of places to rest long before she reached his gate. Near midday, hoofbeats approached again. Don Mateo rode into the yard, dust on his boots, concern in his eyes. He greeted Raphael with a firm grip, then glanced at Isabella with a long, measuring look. This, her? He asked quietly. She's working, Raphael said. So does a mule, Mateo muttered. Doesn't mean you keep it forever. Raphael frowned. She's earning her stay. Mateo spat into the dust. Loneliness keeps you safe, hijo. It also keeps you empty. Raphael didn't answer. The truth of those words stuck under his skin more than he liked. After Mateo left, Isabella cleaned the water trough, her sleeves rolled up, hands steady. When she noticed Raphael watching, she asked, Your friend doesn't like me much. He doesn't like surprises, Raphael said. Are you surprised? She asked softly. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't have an answer, because he had too many. That evening, they sat on the porch with 10 mugs of coffee. The sunset bled red across the desert, turning the sky into a sheet of fire. She told him about the markets of Mexico City, the smell of roasting corn, the music that filled the plazas. Her voice carried pieces of a life she had lost, one too full of noise and pain. He told her about the ranch in better years, before drought, before burial, before he learned how quiet a house could become. The silence between them didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt steady. Just as the last of the light faded, a fence post groaned and split in the wind. Raphael stood. We'll fix it in the morning. She looked at the broken post, then back at him. If trust is a fence, she said quietly, then let me help you build it. Her words stayed with him longer than the sound of the wind. The next morning came cold and gray. She was already in the yard with wire looped over her shoulder. They repaired the fence side by side, Canelo trotting between them. She held the post steady, hands braced firm against the earth. "Strong enough to keep the cattle in," she said, "and strong enough to slow down anyone trying to cut through," Raphael added. She looked over. "You think the men Matteo warned you about will come this way?" He didn't lie. "It's possible." By noon, the fence stood tall again, and they walked back toward the barn. Their boots fell into the same rhythm without them trying. Later that week, the days found their rhythm too. She made coffee before sunrise on the phone. They worked the land together. She asked questions about cattle. He found himself answering more than he expected. The house felt different with another voice inside it, lighter, fuller, warmer. Even the dog seemed to approve, often lying at her feet as she worked. One afternoon, Raphael and Isabella were stacking hay when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Mariquita Lopez, the young neighbor girl, jumped off her horse before it stopped moving. "They hit a trader near Arroyo Seco," she said breathlessly. 3 men. Took everything. One of them asked if there was a ranch south of La Paz with a woman on it. Raphael stiffened. "How far?" he asked. "Half a day's ride," she said. "Maybe less." Isabella didn't move. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened. "They're looking for me," she said quietly after Mariquita rode off. "The man I ran from, he doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive." Raphael stepped closer. "You're safe here. You don't know what he's capable of."
"I know enough," Raphael said.
"And we'll be ready." That night they ate supper in silence, both thinking of fences and shadows and men who rode with cruel intentions. When they sat on the porch, the dusk wrapped around them like a thin veil. Canelo stayed close, alert. "I didn't come here to be saved," Isabella said, her voice steady. "I came to stand beside you." Raphael looked at her in the soft lamplight. Something in him, something silent and stubborn, softened. She rose, crossing the yard to the barn. Raphael watched the lantern glow behind her as she climbed the loft ladder. Before sunrise, she was already drawing water from the well, her feet steady in the dust. When he joined her, she looked up with a faint smile. The days ahead would be hard. The men hunting her were drawing closer, but they had begun to build something stronger than fear. And soon she would make a proposal that would change the shape of both their lives. The wind that evening carried the smell of mesquite and something heavier, like a warning stretched thin across the desert. Raphael had just finished washing up when he noticed Isabella standing in the kitchen doorway. The lantern light framed her in a warm glow, her expression steady but thoughtful. "Sit," she said. 2 plates waited on the table. Beans, roasted squash, tortillas wrapped in a cloth. Something in her voice told him this wasn't a simple meal. They ate quietly at first, the kind of quiet that wasn't uncomfortable, just full of things waiting to be said. When she finally set her fork down, she looked straight at him. "I've been thinking about how things are," she began. Raphael frowned slightly. "Death, things." "You gave me a roof," she said. "I've been giving you labor, but both of us know that's not the real trade happening here." He stiffened. "Say what you mean."
"I mean sharing the roof," she said softly. "Sharing the bed."
Sharing the truth. Her words landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Raphael leaned back, folding his arms. "It's not as simple as you make it sound." "It is," she said, "if we choose it." He looked down at her hands, then into her eyes, steady, unafraid. "You know I was engaged once," he said. "She left me a week before the wedding. Said I was too plain, not enough." "I'm not her," Isabella said. "And I'm not asking you to pretend I am." The house seemed to hold its breath. Raphael exhaled slowly.
"If we do this, it's real."
"Not temporary, not convenience." "That's the only way it means anything," she replied. The decision settled between them like the final piece of a fence finally hammered into place. That night, the kitchen lamp burned low as Raphael stepped outside. The porch was cool, the moon silvering the corral rails. He stood there a long time, weighing the risks, the road behind him, and the one ahead. When he went inside, he walked not to the barn door, but to his own bedroom. Isabella followed after a moment, carrying only a folded blanket and her small valise. "You'll move into the house tonight," he said quietly, "if you're sure." "I'm sure." The room was small, just a sturdy wooden bed, an old wardrobe, and a lamp glowing soft on the table. She set her blanket down, turned, and faced him with a calm he envied. "No pretending," she said. "I remember." Her hands lifted, resting lightly on his chest. He could feel every beat of his heart under her palms. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing the same air. Then she stepped closer, closing the last space between them. The kiss was slow, careful, but full of days of unspoken wanting. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, two hearts finally found the warmth they'd both been missing. They lay side by side afterward, the distance between them gone, the quiet a softer kind of quiet than this house had ever known. Raphael fell asleep with her fingers laced in his, but peace in Baja never lasted long. They woke to a day that felt different, heavy, expectant. As the week passed, the ranch filled with new purpose. Raphael reinforced the gates. Isabella braced the barn doors. Every sunset brought them closer, every quiet moment more certain. Then came the afternoon when Isabella froze with one hand pressed to her belly. "Raphael," she whispered, "I think I might be carrying your child." The hammer slipped from his hand. He crossed the yard in 3 steps and pulled her close. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I know my own body." Warmth flooded his chest. Fear, wonder, hope, all tangled together. A child. Their child. He didn't say anything. Words were too small for what he felt. He held her instead, the wind bending around them like a blessing. News traveled fast across the desert. Don Mateo arrived the next evening, climbing stiffly from his saddle. "I heard," he said, offering a rare smile. "Congratulations." Then his voice hardened. "The gang's asking questions in San Antonio. They're coming south." Isabella stood beside Raphael. She didn't flinch. "Then we prepare," she said. For 3 days they worked like a single heartbeat, reinforcing the gates, setting up lantern signals, keeping the rifles cleaned and ready. Mariquita rode in breathless one afternoon. "They robbed another peddler," she said. One of them asked if he'd seen a woman with green eyes. Raphael felt Isabella move closer, her hand finding his without hesitation. "We'll face it," he said. "Together." The gang arrived at dusk, shadows first, then shapes on horseback at the far fence line. Raphael raised his Winchester. Isabella stood beside him, pistol steady in her hand. Their home glowed behind them. Their unborn child rested between them. Their courage stood with them. But the men didn't attack. Not yet. They lingered in the dark, testing the edges of the ranch, then vanished into the night. Morning revealed hoofprints pressed deep into the sand. "They'll be back," Isabella said. "And we'll be ready," Raphael answered. 1 week later, under the ringing church bells of La Paz, Raphael and Isabella stood before a small crowd. Her white dress fluttered in the warm breeze, her hands resting on her growing belly. Their voices rang clear. "We choose each other, storm or sun." They rode home as husband and wife, the desert opening wide in front of them. A storm rolled in that night. Wind screamed against the adobe walls. The midwife unpacked her tools. Raphael held Isabella's hand as she fought through each wave of pain. "You've held fences against worse," he whispered. She even managed to smile through it. Lightning cracked the sky. Rain hammered the roof. And then a cry, a strong one. A baby boy with midnight black hair and green eyes like desert rain. Isabella held him close. Raphael rested a gentle hand on his son's tiny back. "He'll know he was wanted," she whispered. "He'll know," Raphael promised. By dawn, the storm had scrubbed the world clean. Hoofprints from the gang had been erased. Trouble had passed them by. Raphael stepped onto the porch, his newborn son cradled against his chest. The land stretched wide and silent, not empty anymore, but full. Don Mateo arrived later, tipping his hat. "Looks like you built more than fences," he said. Mariquita peeked at the baby, eyes shining. "What's his name?" Raphael looked at Isabella. "Alejandro," she said softly. Years later, the story would become something of a legend in the village. People would say it began with danger, but really, it began with a woman walking down a lonely road and a man who decided, for the first time in years, to open his gate. What they built after that became the heart of the desert, a family, a home, a life worth defending. And every evening, long after the cattle settled and the world grew quiet, two cups waited on the porch, side by side, catching the last light of the sun.